All right, I will say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin a beautiful, beautiful daf ahead of us today. I will say let's begin. So first of all, thank you to all of our sponsors. Thank you to our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Kislev. Josh and Becker Friedi for dedicating all the Shuman Drushos this month. Le'iloi Nishmas Josh's father Yisrael Yehuda ben Rav Chaim Rifal Zichron Lebracha. To thank Sammy and Malka Esterson for dedicating all the Shuman Drushos this month in memory of their parents. Yitzchak Leib ben Aaron HaKohen, Sarah Rachel Bas Baruch Avram, Hinda Bas Henech Ephraim, and in the zichus of the continued health and longevity of Mr. Morton Esterson Admeve Esm Shanim Tovos. To thank the Pepper family for dedicating all the Shurim this month, in commemoration of the yard site of Yosef Pepper, Yosef David Zichron Livracha Ben Yaakov. To thank our week of learning sponsor, Steve Golaskov, in honor of the wedding of his daughter Rivi last night, Eli Bogart. And by the way, Steve is here this morning. This might be a first. This might be a Daf Yomi first. Steve, you're speaking at the next Siyum HaShas. I'm just telling you, right? This is mamish, absolutely a beautiful, beautiful chasana last night, and it's a beautiful chasana in Kala. And Yirtzeh Hashem, Steve should be zocha to Dorei Doros, a beautiful Yiddish nachas. To thank the Pepper family for dedicating the week of learning in the merit of a refuah shlema for Yaakov ben Rachel, and to thank Ayal and Sarah Steinberg for dedicating the week of learning in the schus of a refuah shlema for Shulamis Bas Susha. We thank all of our sponsors for their incredible generosity, and Rabosai, let us begin. So today's daf is Lamed Ches 38. So we have a lot to do today, but some really great Gemara. We are picking up on Lamed Zayin Amud Beis 37b. Okay, we actually have a lot to do here also. So we are picking up, let's pick up 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18 lines up from the bottom. It'd be easier to count down from the top, but that's a little depressing. So let's go. 18 lines up from the bottom. So if you remember again, so we were into a whole discussion yesterday regarding the concept of ma'ani bechinam, afata bechinam, the inability to get paid for teaching Torah. So if you can't get paid for teaching Torah, what is a Rebbe paid for? So we had a machlokes, right? The machlokes between Rav and Rabbi Yochanan. So Rav says, essentially, again, what you get, what the Rebbe gets paid for is watching the kids, right? Babysitting. And what's about that? We don't mean babysitting in a pejorative fashion. I mean, like babysitting, he has his responsibility to watch over the kids while he's teaching them, so he gets paid for that. And Rabbi Yochanan said, Pisuk Tamim, trup, teaching them trup. Now, the idea of paying the Rebbe for teaching them trup would highlight to us that trup is not the oraisa. Because if trup was the oraisa, then how could you get paid for it? Because it would fall under the umbrella of ma'ani bechinam, just like Moshe Rabbeinu taught us for free, so too the Rebbe has to teach us for free as well. The Gemara then quoted an opposing opinion. And the Gemara said, Kasavar, Pisuk Tamim Daraisa. Another opinion says, no, the trup is the oraisa. Trup is the oraisa. So in other words, so Rav, who holds that a Rebbe gets paid for watching the kids, why doesn't he agree that the Rebbe gets paid for teaching trup? Because Rav holds that Pisuk Tamim trup is the oraisa. So here we go. I'll say, the Amar, Rabbi Ika bar Avin Amar Chanana Amar Rav. My the Amar, what does the pasuk mean when it says, Rabbi say, Gemara over here is quoting the pasuk. Quoting the pasuk from Nehemiah, Vayikru b'sefer b'torah Elokim mefurash v'som seichel vayavinu b'mikra. So that's the pasuk. So I'll say ultimately again in this particular pasuk, Nehemiah is reading the Torah before Klal Yisrael, and the pasuk says as follows. So the Gemara darshans it. Vayikru b'sefer. What does it mean? They read in the book. Vayikru b'sefer Torah Elokim ze mikra. That refers to Chumash. Mefurash. It was explained ze targum. So I'll say targum normally refers ultimately again to Targum Onkelos. An Aramaic translation, good. V'som seichel, elu hapsukim. So we're going to see, it's actually interesting, the Ran points out over here, well, I'm going to read it outside just because of time, but the Ran understands, V'som seichel elu hapsukim, nekudos hamafsikos bin pasuk lepasuk. This refers, to how you break up the psukim. Because as we're going to see, again, obviously the Torah doesn't have punctuation, so sometimes it's not exactly clear how to go ahead and break up the psukim. We'll actually see an example of where there was a machlokes between Babel and Eretz Yisrael about how to break up a particular pasuk. So this v'som seichel is how to break up the psukim. Vayavinu b'mikra. So I was saying they will understand the psukim. What does that refer to? Zeh pisuk tamim. This ultimately again refers to trop. To trop. V'amri la, others say, Eila hamasoros. This refers ultimately again to the Masorah. So we're going to see Masoros means certain traditions which were handed down again from Moshe Rabbeinu about certain psukim in the Torah. So let's analyze. I'm Rabbi Yitzchak. So we'll say the point over the Gemara is making is there is an opinion that holds that the trup itself is a da'araisa. So the Gemara says, I'm Rabbi Yitzchak. Mikra Sofrim, the Eater Sofrim. So we'll say what we call Mikra Sofrim. The Ran says Mikra Sofrim is Hakriya Shemasan Rishon Shnikru Sofrim. How to read certain words, that's called Mikra Sofrim. Eater Sofrim means certain extra words or certain extra letters that do not need to be in the pasuk, but are there. The Karyon Velo Ksivan, we'll say what we call the Kri and Iksiv, right? There are certain things that are read, certain psukim that are read a certain way, but not written that way. Oksivan velo karyon, or certain things that are written a certain way, but not read that way. All of those things, halacha l'Moshe misinai. So we'll say all of these different things we call a kri and ksiv. Something's read differently than it's written. Extra words that don't seem to be necessary for the meaning of the pasuk. Ultimately, again, mikra sofrim, iter sofrim, these are all halacha l'Moshe misinai. So the Gemara just gives some examples of this. We'll say what's an example of mikra sofrim? So we'll say what's an example about how we have a tradition how to read something. So it's actually very interesting. So Eretz or Aretz, Shamayim, Mitzrayim. So I'll say if you look, the way these words are read, the Ran points out is it sounds like there's an aleph in it, the way it's pronounced, right? The sound. But ultimately, again, there's no aleph in it, obviously, but it's read as if there is. Itor Sofrim. So we'll say what does Itor Sofrim mean? So this refers to extra words that aren't necessary for the actual meaning of the text. So Iter Sofrim, so Achar Ta'avoru, Achar Telech, Achar Te'asef. So we'll say in all of these cases, the word Achar is really unnecessary. Kad Musarim, Achar Nognim, Sidkascha, Kahar Rekel. So we'll say all examples of psukim which have words, but the words, there are extra words there that are not essential for the meaning of the text. Karyan Veluk Sivan, what's the example? We'll say something that is read, but is not written in the text. So the Gemara says, Pras dibelechto. Right? So again, Gemara's just over here quoting Pesukim. This pasuk over here is quoting Shmuel Beis. So this is an example. The word pras is read in the pasuk, yet it's not written in the pasuk. V'ish dikasher yishal ish bidvar elokim. Another example, I will say again, of a word that's read, but ultimately not written in the pasuk. Be'im nivnasa, lo dipleta, Estahagate Hugad, Elai de Hogron, Elai das Orim, Halin Karyan Velok Sivan. So we'll say again, we're not going to go into each of these examples, but these are all examples of things that are read. The word is read. In other words, we have a Masorah that a word is part of a pasuk, and a word is read part of a pasuk, yet it's not written in the pasuk itself. Okay, the Kasvan Velok Karyan. So we'll say, what are examples of words that are written but are not read? So a word that is written in the Torah, in the pasuk in Tanakh, but ultimately not read. What are examples of this? Na diyislach. So I'll say the one example is, again, he's quoting over here the pasuk from Malachim Beis. Ultimately, again, there's a word na that's written in the pasuk, but it's not read. It's not read. So zos top of lamed ches, zos da mitzvah, yadruch dajrucha, chamesh tipaas negev, im dichi goel. Halin kasvan velo karyon. Again, the Gemara is just giving examples. I will say these are examples of things that ultimately, again, are written but not read. So I'll say the point that the Gemara is making over here, all of these things, right? Some things that are written and not read. Some things that are read but are not written. How to break up psukim, trup. All of these things are a halacha l'Moshe misinai. All of this was handed down. The Gemara is something very interesting. Third line down. In Eretz Yisrael, paskin lahadein psuka l'tlasin psukim. So in Eretz Yisrael, they broke up the following pasuk into 3 psukim. I will say this is very interesting. We have this pasuk as one pasuk. I'll just read it to you. So the pasuk the Gemara is quoting over here is as follows. The pasuk is Vayomer Hashem al Moshe Hine anochi ba'elecha ba'avhana. Hashem says to Moshe, I'm coming to you in the thickness of or in the cover of the cloud. Ba'avor yishma ha'am bidabri imach. So that the nation will hear, or the nation will know that I spoke with you, or the nation will listen when I spoke with you. They will believe in you, Moshe, as my prophet. Moshe Hashem. And Moshe told over the words of Hashem to the people. So we'll say, we have this, right, in our Masorah, we have this as one long pasuk. The Gemara just quoting that in Eretz Yisrael, the Masorah in Bavel, our Masorah was that we had this as one long pasuk. In Eretz Yisrael, the Masorah they had was this was broken up into 3 different psukim. So again, all the Gemara is pointing up on, as Rose says, is as much as we just said before, that pisuk, right, that ultimately the breaking up of psukim is halacha l'Moshe Misinai. It's interesting that it could be that by certain psukim there was a dispute as to what exactly was the halacha l'Moshe Misinai. So Rose say, which is interesting because normally if it's halacha l'Moshe Misinai, that means that what? There's no dispute. So it's just interesting. Again, I don't know if the Gemara seems to say maybe this was the only pasuk with which there was a machlokas, but again, just to point out, even in Pisuk Tamim, there was a different practice in Babel and Eretz Yisrael. Good. So now we're going to come into some beautiful Agada Gemara. Beautiful. I meant to put it out on the chat last night. Okay, beautiful Gemara. So listen to this. So I'm Rabbi Chana Bachanina. Lo ha'eshir Moshe Ella mipsulasan shaluchos. We'll say, how did Moshe Rabbeinu make his money? Because remember, we'll say, what's the tie-in over here? The tie-in over here is that, remember, again, the pasuk said, Moshe taught Klal Yisrael bechinam, right? Ma'ani bechinam, avata bechinam, right? Moshe Rabbeinu did not get a salary, so to speak, from Klal Yisrael. So where did he make his money? Now the truth is, it's not really such a shaila. Now, I just want to point out something. Remember, where did Klal Yisrael have money from? Right? Where do we have money from? Right? Mitzrayim, right? So remember again, Klal Yisrael took the spoils of Egypt. But Chazal tell us, Moshe Rabbeinu, when Klal Yisrael was going ahead and collecting the spoils of Egypt, what was Moshe Rabbeinu doing? He was Atzmos Yosef, right? He was going in and collecting the remains of Yosef. So Moshe Rabbeinu, where did he have money from? Now again, in the desert, it's not really a big deal. You don't need currency in the desert. You have mun, you have everything you need. But nevertheless, again, I will say, we're going to see why Moshe Rabbeinu needed money in just a moment. Why did he need money? So Moshe Ella mipsulasan shaluchos. So Moshe, listen to this. Moshe Rabbeinu was told to go ahead and get tablets. So the tablets, obviously, again, were hewn. Now, in the first set of tablets, Chalash Baruch Hu did it himself, right? In the second set of tablets, Moshe Rabbeinu had to hew the stones himself. The Gemara says Moshe Rabbeinu got to keep the shavings of the tablets. Now you'll say to yourself, okay, tablets are stone, right? So how does that help Moshe Rabbeinu? So I'll show you something amazing. If you look at the Rush, Rush is on the right-hand column. When the Rush says, well, actually, let's read it first. I'm sorry, in the Gemara. So Lo Hesh Moshe Elam Psulasan Shaluchos. Moshe Rabbeinu got to keep the shavings of the luchos. Shneimar Psalecha Shnei Luchos Avonim Karishonim. Literally, again, this is by the second luchos. Hew out for yourself, right? Carve out 2 stone tablets. Psulasan shalchayehe. The shavings are yours. And I will say, how does that help Moshe to have stone shavings? Look at the Rush. This is incredible. The Rush writes, right-hand margin of the Gemara, about 8 lines in, Psalecha v'shel san pirnon hanu. So the Rush says the tablets were sapphire. So I will say, because the tablets were sapphire, Moshe Rabbeinu got to keep all of the sapphire shavings, and that's how ultimately, again, he became wealthy. So I will say, isn't that absolutely beautiful? So I will say, I'll just tell you 2 quick things. It's not that we have time to go into any of this. And I will say, why Moshe Rabbeinu had to be wealthy, we're going to see in just a moment. In other words, why? In other words, obviously, he's rich now. He's rich. He's got all the sapphire shavings. Why that had to be that way, we'll talk about it. But I was very struck last night by this lashon of that Moshe Rabbeinu lohesh. Moshe Rabbeinu becomes wealthy mipsulasan shaluchos, from the psoles. Now again, psoles often means like what? Like the leftovers, right? And the stuff that's not so great. So I tell you something very interesting. So I saw an incredible idea quoted by the Sefer Minchas Machvas. And I will say, listen to how beautiful this is. Moshe Rabbeinu was his hallmark, right? His greatest accomplishment was his singular dedication to Klal Yisrael. Singular dedication to Klal Yisrael. But I will say, but the greatness of Moshe Rabbeinu was also his unwillingness to ever give up on any Jew, no matter how terrible they were, right? No matter how much they transgressed, right? The Meraglim come along, Moshe Rabbeinu advocates for us. We build the golden calf, Moshe Rabbeinu advocates for us. Says the Minchas Machva something so beautiful. Lo ha'eshir Moshe. Do you know Moshe Rabbeinu's greatest accomplishment? His greatest accomplishment? How did he become rich? Mipsulasan shaluchos. I will say, what's the psulasan shaluchos? That refers to the Jews who are psolas, right? To the Jews who just totally take wrong turns in life and do the most terrible and heinous things. Moshe Rabbeinu never even gave up on those individuals. Moshe Rabbeinu gave up on no one. You built a golden calf, which remember again, Chazal compare to a bride committing adultery underneath her chuppah. It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad, right? So Moshe Rabbeinu will advocate for you. You go ahead and you're the Meraglim, Moshe Rabbeinu will advocate for you. Lo ha'eshir Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu's greatest enrichment, his greatest life accomplishment was the psulasan shaluchos. Even those Jews who were psulasan shaluchos, the psoles, the leftovers, the nebuchs, the terrible stuff, right? The shavings, they're not even part of the luchos. They're the shavings of the luchos. They set themselves aside. Moshe Rabbeinu never gave up on those Jews. That's Moshe Rabbeinu's greatest accomplishment. There's more to see on that, but we'll go weiter. So Torah was only, let's listen to this. Torah was originally only given to Moshe and his offspring. Shenemar, ksav lecha, psal lecha. Ma psulasan shalcha, just like Moshe Rabbeinu got to keep the shavings. Afkasvan shalcha, so too, Torah really belonged to Moshe. This is incredible. In the original plan, Torah was only going to be given to Moshe and his descendants. That's it. Moshe, your descendants, you'll have Torah, and it's yours. What happened? So when I said Moshe nog bat tovas ayin, Moshe Rabbeinu was generous, benasna li Yisrael, and he decided to share his treasure with Klal Yisrael. Va'alav ha'kasav omer, and about Moshe Rabbeinu it is said, Tov ayin hu yivorach. He who is generous will be blessed. I will say, so beautiful, so beautiful. So Torah was originally given to Moshe Rabbeinu, and Moshe Rabbeinu decides to share it with Klal Yisrael. And I will say, by the way, the two ideas are very much interlinked. The same way that Moshe Rabbeinu's greatest wealth was psulasan shaluchos, those Jews who everyone else gave up on. Moshe Rabbeinu's entire life was dedicated to the Klal. So Hashem gives him this beautiful gift of Torah. He says, I can't keep this for myself. I have to share this with my nation. Absolutely beautiful. Maser Rav Chisda, Rav Chisda argues. He says, what do you mean Torah was only given to Moshe? It doesn't make any sense. So Maser Rav Chisda, Pasuk says, that Moshe Rabbeinu says, and Hashem commanded me at this time to teach you Torah, which sounds like, again, Torah was given to all of Klal Yisrael, not just to Moshe. So no, the way to read it is, right, so no, the way to read the pasuk is, Hashem commanded me to keep Torah, meaning Hashem gave Torah to me, and I, Moshe Rabbeinu says, of my own volition, decided to share that great treasure with you. Umishpatim kasher tzivani Hashem Elokai. The pasuk says, Moshe Rabbeinu says, I have taught you laws and statutes as Hashem commanded me, which sounds like Hashem gave Torah to all of Klal Yisrael. The way to read it is, Osit Tziva, to me, really the way to read it is, Moshe Rabbeinu says, Hashem commanded me about Torah. Hashem gave me Torah, va'ani lachem, and I went along and shared it with you. V'ata kisu lachem es ashira azos. So we'll say, the pasuk says, Moshe Rabbeinu says, write for yourselves this shira. Ha'azinu. So you see that Torah was given to Klal Yisrael, to which the Gemara says, no, hashira l'chuda. So ultimately, again, it's only the shira. It's only the shira that was given to Klal Yisrael, right? However, here's the problem. Li ashira azos li'eid b'bnei Yisrael. So we'll say, here's the problem. The shira, right, ha'azinu, is a form of testimony. We'll say, what's the testimony? The testimony is you were given Torah. If you keep Torah, good, and if you don't keep Torah, here are the series of ramifications and repercussions. So you see that Torah was given to Klal Yisrael. Ella pilpula ba'alma. I will say this is absolutely fascinating. What does it mean pilpula ba'alma? I will say if you look at Rashi on the right-hand side, Rashi says pilpula ba'alma about 4 lines into the short lines. Lahavin davar mitoch davar Hu dinitin l'Moshe, v'nieg ba tovas ayin v'nos li'Yisrael. We'll say incredible. See, Torah was given to Klal Yisrael. So what was uniquely given to Moshe? We'll say what we call pilpul. So what we'll call analysis, right? Analysis. The tools of analysis, of Torah analysis, were originally just given to Moshe. See, which is very interesting. In other words, the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu originally kind of saw Torah for us was how? He was going to give us Torah, and I will say, what would we do? Right? It would be a series of do's and don'ts. Right? And again, of course, still with understanding, but not really with accompanying analysis. Analysis would be done by Moshe, and I guess Moshe Rabbeinu's descendants, and we would really not have that power. In other words, I will say, like what we do, Gemara. This wouldn't be part. So Moshe Rabbeinu does something amazing, and he shares with us the tools of analysis. Shares us tools of analysis, almost as if the Rebbe understood. Moshe Rabbeinu, who was the first Rebbe, understood that's what? That if you want Jews to go ahead and love their Torah, so you have to give them the tools of analysis so they can work at it. Because if I can't work at it, right? If I can't analyze, if I can't turn it over, if I can't try to understand, I'm not kona it. I don't acquire it in the same way. So Torah was given to all of Klal Yisrael. Pilpul, analysis, was originally only given to Moshe. And what? And then Moshe shared analysis with us, which I will say also teaches you something amazing. You do not need analysis to fall in love with Torah. Right, I guess contrary to the idea of every yeshiva bacher, right? You don't need analysis. In fact, sometimes one can make the argument that the purest form of Torah is Torah without analysis. I will say, by the way, that's the beauty of Chassidus. It's the beauty of Chassidus, right? I have a friend of mine. Who I got him into Kedushas Levi, Rabbi Yitzchak Berditchev. He called me last day of Shabbos and he said, Shmuel, I said, I read this piece of the Rebbe. I have no idea what it's talking about. I said, I know, isn't it great? Right? I said, you don't have, who said you have to know what it's talking about? See, that's the mistake. That's the mistake. Who says you have to understand the words of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak for it to penetrate your neshama? I said, how do you, maybe your avoda is just read it. It's just read it. You see, the difference we think is that Torah only has an impact on us if my mind understands it. If my mind understands that it's Torah. Who says? Who says? There's a power sometimes to just reading words of a tzaddik, even if you have absolutely no idea what he's talking about, because your mind doesn't understand it, but your neshama understands every single word. I will tell you that sometimes I find that it's such an interesting thing. When I want like a little bit of a burst, you take out a Likutei Moharan, Rabbi Nachman, and Rabbi Nachman sometimes is very hard to understand. You go out and you read a few lines, and I'm telling you, you just feel different. Do I know what the Rebbe said? Pick up something here, pick up something there. I will say sometimes the highest realm of Torah is not the Torah you learn with your mind. It's the Torah you learn with your heart. Again, I'm not advocating for not understanding what we learn, but sometimes we think that Torah is all about the mind, and we forget the power that it has on the neshama. Kadosh Baruch Hu didn't give us pilpul. Kadosh Baruch Hu didn't give us the tools of analysis. That's not what he gave us. He gave that to Moshe. Someone has to have that. But Kadosh Baruch Hu's original plan, that wasn't for all of us. Me and you, we were supposed to just learn Torah. Just learn Torah. Get a beautiful gishmak. Just see the words. Let it penetrate your soul. Moshe was given pilpul. Moshe decides that he has to share it with us. Shabbos said there's an incredible avoda in Torah, and sometimes not using your mind, but using your heart. In any event, the Gemara goes on. Amar, Rabbi Yochanan will say, incredible Gemara, Eina Kadosh Baruch Hu mashish shchinaso, ela al gibor, va'ashir v'chacham va'anaf. Rabbi will say, Kadosh Baruch Hu only rests his presence, his shchina, on someone who is strong, rich, and smart. So we'll say, so let's analyze this. So this ties back, and humble, I'm sorry, thank you, and humble. So we'll say, so this, forgot that one. Right? So we'll say, so ultimately, again, this goes back to what we said before, because remember, the unanswered question is, the Gemara tells me Moshe Rabbeinu was wealthy from the shavings of the luchos. What doesn't the Gemara tell me? Why does Moshe Rabbeinu have to be wealthy? So now I understand it. The Shekhinah only rests its presence on someone who is strong, rich, wise, and humble. So I'll say the idea over here is, what does it mean, the Shekhinah? So this on one hand could be talking about Nevuah. It could also be just talking about the concept of Shekhinah resting itself on someone is also the term that Chazal use for leadership. What are the qualities one needs in order to be a leader? So we'll say if you go through them, it's actually quite amazing. So Gibor makes sense. Gibor doesn't have to mean physical prowess. Gibor could also mean spiritual or emotional fortitude. You have to be willing to take stands. You have to be willing to take unpopular positions. You have to be willing to stand up for what's right. And again, brace yourself for the tidal wave of negativity that is going to come in its aftermath. Right? Ashir, wealth. Shabbos, wealth is associated with every single major position of Jewish leadership. And it makes perfect sense, right? The king has to be wealthy. The Kohen Gadol has to be wealthy. It's very helpful for leaders to be wealthy. Why? Because Shabbos, if you're wealthy, then you don't have to do things for money. Right? It's, again, the problem often in positions of leadership is you need people with money, right? Because you need people with money because you want to have money yourself. But Lamaisa, if a person is wealthy, then they don't have to bow to the pressure of those who have money. Chacham makes sense. In other words, if you're going to be a leader, you have to have wisdom. If you don't have wisdom, then at the end of the day, you can't lead. And enough, humility. We're both saying that's the easiest one to understand because it's easy for leadership to go to one's head and to lead to an excessive sense of self, right? An inflated sense of self. Humility is the most, it's interesting that it's last, even though it's probably number one. Humility is necessary in order to maintain a proper personal disposition, even while having such incredible responsibility. Who do we learn this from? The Kulami Moshe. We learn all of these traits from Moshe. What's the see from Moshe? So Gibor, how do we know that Moshe was strong? Moshe Rabbeinu spread the top canopy over the Mishkan, which means he was very tall and very strong. Moshe Rabbeinu parso uksiv Eser amos orach hakeresh. Right, so we'll say border of the Mishkan was 10 amos tall, which is very tall. Right, so we'll say amos a foot and a half. So therefore, again, that's pretty tall. Yeah, Moshe Rabbeinu was able to go ahead and spread the roof over the Mishkan. Ema da'arach the katan. Maybe Moshe was tall and lanky. In other words, just because he was tall doesn't mean he was strong. Ella min hadein kra comes from this pasuk. Siv ve'et post b'shnei luchos va'ashlichem me'al shtei yadai va'ashabrei. Moshe Rabbeinu took the luchos and he threw them down. So say Moshe Rabbeinu, when he breaks the first set of tablets, he doesn't drop them, but he throws them. So we'll say Vitanya haluchos arkon shisha. The luchos were 6 tfachim. Right, 6 tfachim long. V'rach ban shisha, 6 tfachim wide. V'avan shosha, they were 3 tfachim. They were 3 tfachim in width. So we'll say so they're thick, 3 tfachim in thickness. So we'll say the idea is that's a lot of stone. That's a lot of stone. So to be able to cast that amount of stone must have meant that Moshe Rabbeinu was very strong. That's Gibor. Ashir, we know that Moshe Rabbeinu was rich. Here we go. Psalacha, psulas and shachayah. As we said before, Moshe Rabbeinu gets to keep the sapphire shavings of the luchos. Chacham, how do we know that Moshe Rabbeinu was wise? Rabbi Shmuel Silber, chamishim sha'ari bina nivru ba'am. There are 50 gates of wisdom in the world. The kulam natnu leMoshe. And we'll say ultimately again, all of them were given to Moshe. So the Gemara goes right to Chasra, except for one. Right? Moshe Rabbeinu is given 49 levels of wisdom. Shneimar so again, David HaMelech writes in Tehillim, literally he's a bit less than God. And apparently the Gemara understands that pasuk was written about Moshe Rabbeinu. Kadosh Baruch Hu obviously has all levels of wisdom. Moshe Rabbeinu was given 49 out of the 50. Incredible. So how do you know that Moshe Rabbeinu was humbled? The Chsiv, pasuk says, Va'ish Moshe anav ma'od. Moshe Rabbeinu was exceedingly humble. So Rabbi Yochanan said, we'll say first the intermediate wide lines, calling Nevi'im Ashirim Hayumi Nalan. We'll say all of the prophets were rich. How do we know this? Moshe, Mishmuel ume Amos. So it's interesting, by the way, I just want to point out, Moshe Rabbeinu serves as this paradigm for Jewish leadership. Moshe Rabbeinu possessed all of these qualities. He was Gibor, he was strong, he was usher, he was wealthy, he was chacham, he was wise, he was anav, he was humble. And these become the core qualities for future Jewish leaders. Incredible. So the Gemara says as follows. Furthermore, Rabbi Yochanan says, all of the prophets were rich. How do we know this? Minalan, mi Moshe, Mishmuel, Me'amos, Umiyona. So what do we say from all of these prophets? Say so. Moshe dechsev lo chamor echamem nasasi. But listen to this. Moshe Rabbeinu says. Now this is by the episode with Korach, right? Where Moshe Rabbeinu is very frustrated, and he says, "I didn't even take a donkey from them." Moshe Rabbeinu says, "I didn't take anything from Klal Yisrael." Now what is this referring to? Ibalo igra. So if Moshe Rabbeinu was saying, "I never took a donkey to use without paying a rental fee," lafuki demand the shaka below igra. So Moshe say shkoyach. That means he didn't steal anything. That can't be what Moshe Rabbeinu was saying. Ella dafilu beigra. Rather, what Moshe Rabbeinu was saying is, I never even had to rent a donkey from someone else. So Moshe, the Gemara understands the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu never even had to rent a donkey indicates to us what? That he was very wealthy. So maybe not. Dilma mishum da'ani hava. Maybe it's because he was very poor. He never rented a donkey. Why? Why? He didn't have possessions, so he didn't have to rent a donkey. Ella min psalacha. Rather, we'll say again, once again, how do we know that Moshe Rabbeinu was wealthy? That becomes a psalacha. The shavings of the luchos belong to Moshe Rabbeinu. So we'll say that's how we know that Moshe Rabbeinu was wealthy. Shmuel dichsiv. So we'll say, how do we know that Shmuel was wealthy? Because hinene anu bi neged Hashem beneged Mashiach. Es shor mila kachti v'chamer mila kachti. So we'll say here, Shmuel also in a moment of frustration says, Hashem, right? Shmuel Hanavi says, Hashem, I never took anything of theirs, right? I never took an ox, I never took a donkey. So ibechinam, so if Shmuel means that he never took a donkey without paying for it, man shakel bechinam, so is Shmuel saying he never stole anything? That's pretty obvious. Elo ta'afilu b'schar. Shmuel saying is, I never even rented a donkey from one of them. Dilma da'ani hava. Maybe it's because Shmuel was very poor. El mihacha. Rather, Rabbi said, Shmuel was wealthy. Listen to this beautiful Gemara. Utishuvaso haramasa kisham beso. Rabbi say Shmuel Hanavi was not only the Navi, but he was also the shofet, the judge. Shmuel was the first literal circuit judge. What did he do? Shmuel went around the country to adjudicate the cases of the people. It's incredible, I will say. He didn't make the people come to him. Shmuel went to the people. So the lashon of the pasuk is utishuvasa haramasa. When he came back home to Ramah, that's where he lived. Kisham beiso, for that is where his home was. So once a year he would come bakom home. Rava says, Kol makom shehalach beiso imo. Wherever Shmuel went, his home was with him. So Rabbi say, what the Gemara is understanding over here is like this: when Shmuel traveled, he traveled with his entire home with him. In other words, he wasn't like a vagabond, right? He wasn't like a nomad, but he had all the furnishings of his home wherever he went. So that shows ultimately again his wealth. Kisham beso. See, the way we read the pasuk is he went back to Ramah because that was his home. No, the Gemara says Shuvas Arama. So he went back home to Ramah. Kisham beso. But wherever he was, he traveled with his home. So his furnishings, again, he had a very comfortable life, and therefore all of his furnishings ultimately came with him. I will say, by the way, it's also a good, in this is an interesting musar. Kisham Yisrael tells us that wherever Shmuel went, ultimately, again, his home went with him as well. Which is an interesting idea. Sometimes, when we're home and in our community, we act a certain way. And then what happens? When we go away, whether it's for a vacation or for something else, suddenly again, there's a totally another set of standards. Hey, so what happens? The greatness of Shmuel Hanavi, Kisham Beso. Wherever he went, the standards of his home went with him. Whether he was geographically at home or traveling somewhere else, Lemaisa, the standards, the morals, the pillars of his home accompanied him every step of his journey in life. An incredible musar. The Gemara goes weiter. Amar Rava. So Godol Mashnemar Mishmuel Yosem Mashnemar B'Moshe. The wealth apparently associated with Shmuel is even greater than the wealth associated with Shmuel. So the Gemara says, the wealth said by Shmuel is even greater than that mentioned by Moshe. So right, by Moshe it says, I never went ahead and took a donkey. Afilu b'schar, I never even hired a donkey. Afilu gabi Shmuel, afilu beratzon lo sachru. So Rabbi say, the interesting part is with Moshe Rabbeinu, the concern might be if Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to rent a donkey from someone, even if he didn't want to rent the donkey, you feel compelled to say yes. By Shmuel, there wasn't even a need. Even those who wanted to rent the donkey to Shmuel didn't need it. Vayomru lo ashaksanu v'lo ritzosanu. Okay, Amos tichsiv. Where do we see that Amos was wealthy? Vayan Amos yomer lamatzia lo navi anochi v'lo ben navi anochi ki boker anochi uboles shkamim. Shabbos says, so Amos says to Amasya, I'm not a prophet, I'm not the son of a prophet. What am I? I'm a boker and boles shkam. What does that mean? We're talking about Yosef. Ari mari giti ana ushkamin b'shvelta. Shabbos say, Amos said, what am I? I'm a cattle herder and I have sycamores in the plain. So the idea here is that Amos had cattle, so he owned livestock, and he owned real estate. He owned sycamores. So you see over here that he was wealthy. Yonah, how do we see that Yonah was wealthy? Dichsiv, vayitain schara vayerba. Boss is incredible. Yonah, when he's running away from Hashem, so to speak, right? Because he doesn't want to deliver the prophecy for Nineveh, what does he do? He's in such a rush to get out of town that there's a boat leaving the port in Yafo, and he essentially pays the fare of the entire boat just in order for the boat to leave. Plus, how much was the fare? He didn't wait for the other passengers to come. Instead, he totally bought out the boat. So just so you should know what that would cost. That would cost 4,000 gold pieces. 4,000 gold dinars, which was an exorbitant amount of money. So the idea that Yonah had that amount of money to drop on the boat indicates to us that he was exceptionally wealthy. Shabbos, I'll just point out something amazing. Why the focus on wealth? Why the focus on wealth? There was like the wealth ministry, like why the focus on wealth? Shabbos says, I'm sorry? So first of all, two things. Number one is the idea, that Judaism does not despise wealth. And this is incredibly important. Judaism is not an ascetic religion. Judaism extols material success, not material success as an ends. It's not an ends. That's where it becomes dangerous. It's a means, right? Why does the Jew have money? So he can affect positive change in the world. That's the reason. That's the reason. But I will say also to highlight this idea that there is a power when you see these great men having wealth. It's what allowed them to navigate above the fray. Because I will say, we know that when you're dependent on other people for your parnasa, sometimes it's hard. Sometimes there are things you want to say, but you can't say. There are things you want to do, but you can't do, because you run the risk of alienating the people upon whom you are dependent for your livelihood. The reason why these men were able to affect so much dramatic change is because no one held the financial strings over them. So when Moshe Rabbeinu is financially independent, when Korach and his followers show up, Moshe is able to put that down because I don't need you, so to speak. In other words, I'm independent of you. The Navi is able to say what he needs to say when he does not depend on the klal, ultimately, again, for his paycheck. So that's the idea about having financial independence often allows a leader to do the things that really need to get done. Not for the benefit of the leader, for the benefit of the klal. That's the irony. When the leader is hamstrung because of finances, it's the klal that suffers. But when the leader has, like Moshe has this level of financial independence, then I can really navigate on behalf of the klal. It's incredible. Last piece of Rabbi Yochanan, Betchila haya Moshe lama Torah meshacha. Rabbi said this is incredible. In the beginning, Moshe Rabbeinu, when he learned Torah, he would learn and he would forget. Rabbi say, by the way, how affirming is this? Right? Moshe Rabbeinu would do the daf, and he'd be like, what did we just do? Right? What did we just do? Wow, I could absolutely relate to that. So he would learn Torah, and he wouldn't retain it. Ad shenitna lo b'matana, until Hashem gave him the koach of retention. Ultimately, Shnei Emar, and again, as a gift, Shnei Emar, Vayitin Moshe Kalasol Daber Ito. They both say, what a Gemara. So I will say, what do you see from here, right? Moshe Rabbeinu learned and didn't retain. And so HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave him the gift of retention. So I will say, so two things. What do you see from here? See, I will say, once again, what is our goal when we learn? What is our goal? The goal is not retention. How do you know the goal is not retention? Because what do you see from this Gemara? I don't control retention. HaKadosh Baruch Hu controls retention, right? What's my avoda in Torah? My avoda is effort. Obviously, you could make effort to retain, right? That's chazara, that's review. So I have to put in my effort to retain as well. But at the end of the day, my avoda in Torah ultimately, again, is the effort. I have to get up early and learn. I have to try to understand. That's my goal. Whether I retain it or not, that's my chilek. My chilek is the effort. Retention, that's a gift from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Absolutely incredible. Because so often in life, we're so frustrated when we can't remember. And I say to myself, well, what's the point if I can't remember? What's the point? The point is the effort you expend each and every day. That's my chilek in Talmud Torah. That I deprive myself of sleep in order to learn Moshe Shalom's Torah. That's my accomplishment. That's what I'm here to do. Hopefully, again, I also put in some effort for attention and recognize that I should daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Give me the gift of Moshe. You gave Moshe the gift of retention. I'm going to daven for that same gift as well. Incredible. I will say Mishnah, but back to Nedarim. So we'll say, listen to this. So what happens? We'll say, we're still in the same exact case, by the way. Ruvain, made the neder that Shimon can't get any benefit from him. So now the Mishnah says, even though Reuven made that neder, by the way, so we're coming right back to Agadata in just a moment, don't worry. It says, even though Reuven made the neder that Shimon can't get any benefit from him, so Reuven can't support Shimon, but who can Reuven support? Reuven can support Shimon's wife and children. Rabbi say once again, it's in line with what we learned before, because what's the definition of hana? What is the definition of hana? Something new in your pocket. Over here, Reuven is saving Shimon from an expense. That's not called hana. Even though, again, Shimon is chayiv in the mezonos of his wife and kids. However, what can't Reuven do? Reuven can't feed the behema of Shimon, whether it's a kosher animal or non-kosher animal. Rabbi Eliezer omer zones hatameh ve'eno zones hatahora. So what's the arrangement? Rabbi Eliezer says Reuven could go ahead and feed Shimon's non-kosher animal, but can't feed Shimon's kosher animal. Why the distinction? Amrulo ma bein tameh leTorah. Why is there a difference in kosher and non-kosher animal? Very simple. Amrulo shetorah nafsho l'shamayim v'gufo shalo. Because a kosher animal, its nefesh belongs to Hashem, but its body belongs to the owner. Meaning what Rabbi say? If Reuven feeds the animal, the kosher animal of Shimon, Reuven is providing benefit to Shimon. How? Because if he feeds the kosher animal, what happens? The animal gets fatter. If the animal gets fatter, then what? When Shimon shechts it, he's benefiting from more or richer meat. So in that case, he is providing hana, whereas the non-kosher animal is not fit for consumption. Therefore, again, when Reuven feeds that animal, he's not providing material benefits for Shimon. Tameya, right? If the non-kosher animal, on the other hand, Tameya, nafsha v'gufa l'shamayim. Right? Everything belongs, so to speak, to Hashem, meaning there is no benefit that Shimon really gets from the act of Reuven feeding his animal. Amrulo. So they said back to Rabbi, that's not true. It's not true. Shimon could still benefit from the body of a non-kosher animal. It's true. He can consume it, but Shim Yirtzeh, harihu mocher le'obikochavim o ma'achilo leklavim. They will say, remember again, Shimon can still benefit from the meat of his non-kosher animal, right? He can't eat it, but what can he do? He can sell it to a Gentile, or he can feed it to his dogs. Therefore, I will say, they argue back on Rabbi Eliezer, and they said to Rabbi Eliezer, there's no distinction between a kosher and non-kosher animal. Reuven cannot feed the animal of Shimon, because either way, Shimon will materially benefit. If it's a kosher animal, Shimon will benefit from the meat, and if it's a non-kosher animal, Shimon still benefits from the meat. At the end, they either be through selling it to a Gentile, giving it to his dogs. Good. Says the Gemara, Amr Yitzchak bar Chananya Amr Rav Huna Hamudra Hana Mechaveiro. What's the interesting case? If I make a neder not to get hana for my friend, or not to give hana for my friends. Everyone says the same case. Reuven says to Shimon, he can't get any benefit from me. Mutar lahasilo bito. I can marry off my daughter to him, or he can marry off his daughter. So who's marrying off who, as you can see in just a moment? Havu Rabbi Zera. So Rabbi Zera wondered about this case. But my asking on what's the case? Ilema b'shenich se'avi akala surun ala chasan. If it's a case where the property of the father of the bride is asran to the chasan, hari mosel shivcha l'shamshal. There's going to be hana because right now we're assuming that the daughter being married off is a minor. If she's being married, it was common that if a father was marrying off his minor daughter, he would also provide a shifcha, like a maid servant, domestic help to help out the girl. So that's hana. Ela b'nichsei chasan asurn ala v'akala. Rather, it must be a case where the property of the chasan is aser to the father of the kala. So here's the problem. Gedolim izo amru zanes ishto besbana v'afa b'shu chayim mizon osan. Va'at amar mutar lahasi bito. So the Mishnah already said about say that halacha l'maisa in this kind of case where Reuven made a neder against Shimon, Reuven is still permitted to go out and support Shimon's wife and daughters. If that's the case, then why would marrying off a daughter be problematic? We'll say just finish up. We're talking about a case where the property of the father of the kala is asra on the chasan. Ubebito bogeres umidaita. I will say I'm going to stop over here. What are we talking about? We're talking about ultimately again a case of where I will say there is a situation of the girl who's getting married is a bogeres. When she's a bogeres, I will say meaning what? She's a gedola, and therefore she gets married of her own volition. I will say therefore the Gemara says halacha l'maisa in that kind of case, the marriage is permitted even if there is an isur hana. So I'll say again, I apologize, we went quickly through that case, but we're right on target. We're going to pick up with that case in Meretz Hashem tomorrow. Tomorrow's daf is a little bit shorter. I will say crazy good Agadata on tomorrow's Gemara as well. So we'll get the resolution of this marriage case in Meretz Hashem. Transition to new sugyas. What a week. What a week. I will say shkoyach. All right, Chevron Zoom. Have a great day, everyone. Jerry, what a view. What a view. Incredible. The sun is shining in Eretz Yisrael. All right. All right, have a great day. Good Shabbos, everyone.